No worries. Well, let's hit the drums. So I've got the drums going at the moment. So I thought we'd just build up the energy into today's talk.
Love.
All right. So we are now live, and I've been waiting for this chat to happen because we've had a few lives happen and we haven't been able to make this happen, but now we're into it now. So the title of today's podcast is Life's Purpose, and I think I'm speaking to an expert at the moment because what's life purpose all about? I'd like to start the podcast off with that question.
Well, to really go into purpose, I'd have to share a bit of a story with you first, Kristian, and the audience. So growing up, I was in a bit of domestic violent home. And I'm about 6 years old, and I walk into the kitchen, and my mum and dad are just yelling at each other, and I feel completely invisible, like it didn't even matter, and like I wasn't even there. And so as I go throughout school, I become the fat kid, and to deal with my situation, I just stuck by myself and ate because I thought I was this broken kid from a broken home, and I was bullied a lot and picked on. And then as I go throughout school, it gave me an opportunity to reflect and observe my mind, observe my thoughts, observe my behaviors and the people around me. And then at 16 years old, I'm sitting at home by myself. I have like no friends at the time. It's New Year's Eve, and my mum's partying with her friends out with her friends. My sister's partying out with her friends. So I'm sitting by myself.
Yeah.
And I go into the spare room of the house to keep my mind occupied because I was thinking, what's wrong with me? Why don't I have any friends? And I start rummaging through this box, and I found this this book called The Secret. And I started reading this book, and I was exposed to some information that had made me think a little bit differently.
Okay.
And so for me, that was the start of me like really wanting to understand reality. There was a few pieces missing out of that just didn't quite make sense for me. So I wanted to understand the science. And so that was kind of the kickstart of me kind of inquiring a little bit deeper. And then at 21, I was working on the mines, and that's where I nearly fell 30 meters to my death on a mine site. And I had a near-death experience. And so that activated something within me, and I started questioning, like, I could have been in a box, never to see my family again, like just splattered and flattened on the pavement. So I started asking, why am I here? What if I didn't do anything meaningful or purposeful with my life? What if my life meant nothing? And so I started to ask those deep questions. And so from the ages about 21 to 28, a human being goes through this stage where they start asking the 4 perennial questions, which is, why am I here? Where am I going? Where did I come from? And where am I going next? And so these are the like 4 main deep philosophical questions that human beings have been asking for thousands of years. And the ancient Greeks actually knew the importance of purpose, and they created a whole study on it called teleology. And teleology is the study of meaning and purpose. And the word teleology actually comes from the word telos. So the Greeks had a word for the purpose, which was called your telos. And telos means an end in mind. So if you look at like a single-celled organism, it has a purpose, and it has the lowest form of intelligence because its purpose is to survive, to eat the food, and avoid the predator, to eat food and excrete the waste. That's the lowest form of intelligence, the most primitive form of intelligence in a single-celled organism. It's just to survive. So to the degree of your how, I guess, expansive your purpose is, whether you live day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, will be dependent on the level of conscious intelligence you've obtained. So if you have a vision that's as long, and your purpose, and you're clear on what your life purpose is and what you want to achieve in your lifetime and beyond your life, you're going to be able to gather more resources. You're going to be more creative. You're going to be able to deal with challenge a lot better. You're going to be able to, you're going to be able to focus more.
Yeah, sure.
In pursuit of your purpose. And so there's a part in the brain called the telencephalon. And when anything aligns with your highest purpose, that part of the brain lights up. That's where you have the most retention of information, you have the most intention, and you have the most attention. So you'll have the most intention, meaning your central nervous system will automatically go up and move your body to make that thing happen. You have the most retention of information. So everything you remember, all the information that you can recall is aligned with your purpose. And then also attention. So you have the most focus, concentration, like you won't be distracted by anything else when something's aligned with your purpose. But the problem with modern society is from as soon as we're born, as soon as we learn to walk and talk, we're told to sit down and shut up. And that's where the conditioning comes in. And that's where we get other people's projections of what their purpose and what they want from you is basically injected into our purpose. And we get confused, and we have the voices on these outsides telling us we should do this, we should do that. We look up to other people and we see that they're fulfilling their purpose. Like, oh, they look fulfilled and like they look like they're doing something important in the world. I'm going to do that. And so we inject other people's values into our life and other people's purpose into our life, and we get confused.
Okay. Do you think it's important to have a purpose in life?
100%, man. It's one of the most significant things a human being can do. Like if you look at anyone influential in the world, any millionaire, any billionaire, anyone who's left a mark, anyone who's made a difference on the planet, they've all had that one thing in common.
Okay.
Like if you look at the common thread across all of those people, they all have that one thing in common. They have a clear purpose. They know why they're here. They know why they showed up. And it's all linked also to what's happened in our life. If I go deeper into it, I could go into what's called the study of axiology. Have you heard of that?
I have not, no.
Okay, so in the personal development space, there's a lot of talk about values. Well, axiology is the study of human value systems.
Okay.
And values aren't like a social idealism, like, you should always be honest, or you should always be good to people, you should always be kind. That's a social idealism. But in axiology, the study of values is actually the study of human behavior. And so axiology right now is redefining and revolutionizing modern psychology as we know it. Okay. And so the easiest way I can explain it is, so every human being has a set of priorities and a set of values. Yep. And so whatever's highest on your value, whatever's most meaningful and important to you, you're spontaneously inspired to go and fulfill. You want to make that thing happen. You don't need anyone to remind you. You don't need anyone to tell you to do what is highest on your values. Your highest value is your telos, is your purpose. And everything is governed around that. Everything in all human behavior, everything you've ever done, every action you've ever taken, whether you perceive it as good or bad, in that moment, subconsciously you're doing whatever is giving you the most reward over risk or gain over loss to whatever's your telos. Whatever's the most advantage, what's going to give you the most advantage over disadvantage.
Can I just ask a question? How does one find their purpose in life?
So I was about to get into that, actually.
Okay.
I'll unpack that. So when it comes to values, so values stem from our voids. So if someone comes to you, Kristian, and says, I just want to be loved, I just want to be happy, I just want to be fulfilled. What they're really saying to you is, I'm unhappy, I'm sad, and I'm unfulfilled. So whatever we perceive most as missing in our life, we have a high value to fulfill. And so when we're born into this world, at the point of conception, there's a thing called DNA tagging. And our DNA is tagged with the voids and the values of our parents in that moment. And they're created in the womb and start at the point of conception in the human being. And as we go throughout our life, whatever we perceive missing in our childhood, we have a higher value to fulfill later on in life. So if we perceive, if we grow up, look, there's an example like Warren Buffett, for example, who grew up in poverty. By the time he was 11 years old, he read up all the books on all the financial books in his local library by the time he was 11 years old. And now he's one of the most, the richest investors in the world. So for instance, like all doctors, nurses, carers, healers, they all perceived growing up that there was a lack of care in their life. So they have a higher value to fulfill that later on.
Yeah.
Any police, judges, or lawyers perceived there was a great injustice done by them. So they have a high value on fulfilling that later on in life because there was a void there. Any teachers, any educators, any speakers generally will have a perception that there was a lack of understanding in their life. So they have a high value to understand things and then pass that knowledge on to others. And so whatever we perceive wasn't in our life or isn't in our life drives us to go and fulfill that next thing. So to discover what our purpose is, we have to get really clear on who we are. We have to discover what is driving our behavior, what is driving us as a human being, what things do we perceive missing in our life, and looking at our life, our actions throughout our life and our history, and going into our history and studying ourselves, studying our behavior, studying who we are. If we can do that, and there's a process to that, that's when you can get really fucking clear on how you start to see all the dots, every action, every experience has kind of led you to this point, and it all starts to make sense. You start to realize that, holy shit, there's a hidden order to this whole thing. And you get crystal clear because no one else can tell you what your purpose is.
Yeah.
You have to discover that yourself.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, Brett. We've got 4 live listeners at the moment. So if you are watching this, if you have a question for Brett, pop your question in the comments. I'm happy to ask him. Sorry to interrupt your talk there, Brett. I guess my next question is, do you think this life, what's your opinion on karma? What's your opinion on doing good by others?
So I first started studying a little bit of karma and Buddhism about 7 years ago, properly. And I haven't really gone back to, after I've learned all this new information, I haven't really gone back to look into how it would apply to the universal laws and principles that I now understand. But karma to me right now is, there's a universal law and principle called the law of duality. So everything in humanity exists in a state of duality. We have 2 thumbs, we have 2 ears, we have 2 eyes, 2 nostrils. If we look at the planet as a whole, it's light on one side of the planet at the same time and simultaneously to the same degree it's dark. Then we have, the human form. We break that down into systems, organs, tissues, cells, molecules, atoms, subatomic particles. The smallest subatomic particle in the universe is the hydrogen atom. It has 1 positive phase and 1 negative phase. So everything in humanity is in a state of duality. So when we talk about karma, we're talking about, good and bad, which is in a state of duality.
Yeah.
So if we look at what happens when we collide the two particles of hydrogen together. They now done this. They collided them together, and we made light. And so everything is just a conditional form of light, because everything in the universe, 99.99% of everything in the universe is hydrogen, right? And so light is just another word for energy. Energy is just another word for consciousness. Consciousness is just another word for God. God is just another word for the universe. And so when I say God, by the way, it's not some dude in the sky who's like throwing lightning bolts. Oh, that was Zeus, actually.
Damn, I thought we were talking about Zeus.
But it's not some dude in the sky. It's the organizing principle of the universe. It's what given a single, the single cell within, when we're born, we come from a sperm and an egg, and which forms the first cell, which is the zygote. That intelligence that knows to form a human being, and like a seed knows to form a tree and shoot for the sky, it's the same force. It's the same energy behind that, is what I would call God, which is like the grand organizing design.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, so when it comes to karma, it also, there's going to be a time in our lives where we're going to have to embrace both sides of who we are. Like, if we want to do good in the world, to someone we'll be doing bad. If we want to do something, that's fulfilling, and if we want to do, like, sometimes we're going to have to both embrace both sides of life. Like, we can't always just be plus, always positive, always happy. Like,
yeah.
If you go out and you're fulfilling your purpose and you get a team and you're just, I've got to be good, I've got to be good. And they start, not performing, you're going to have to be mean. Because if I said to you, Kristian, you're always nice and you're never kind. I mean, you're always nice and you're never mean. You're always kind and you're never cruel. You're always good and you're never bad. Would I be telling the truth? Be straight with me.
I think, I think I'm a person. I like to listen to people, and like when it comes to performance and things like that, I know how to drop the hammer. But for me, I'm pretty chill out, dude. Like, I'm not taking life too super serious. I mean, I'm more go with the flow type of guy.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I was a part of that, like, performance background. Like, I used to play a bit of tennis, and man, I think, like, life is just what you make of it. I don't know. It's for me, I know how to drop the hammer when I need to. So I don't always do that, but I like to listen, man. Like, I'm just happy to just listen to people and get their opinion on life, and that's just how I roll at the moment. So yeah, man, it's awesome.
So we're talking about karma, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that's just come up as well is, like I was saying, like in human nature, there's over 4,600 human characteristics and traits, and we all share them, and we all express them in our own unique form. So that's what I was saying. That's why I asked the question. If I said to you, you're always nice and you're never mean, you're always kind and you're never cruel, you're always good and you're never bad, would I be telling the truth?
I don't know. I don't know.
Not, because no human being can just be one-sided. And if I said you're always mean and you're never nice, you're always cruel and you're never kind, you're always bad and you're never good, would I be telling you the truth?
No.
Now, if I said sometimes you're nice, sometimes you're mean, sometimes you're cruel, sometimes you're kind, sometimes you're good, and sometimes you're bad, then you realize that, holy fuck, I'm all of that. I can be both sometimes. I'm not always going to be one-sided. And then this is coming back to karma, is like, well, it's our perception of what we've done in the world. So a while ago, I actually created, so our level of what we feel like we deserve and our level of worth is determined by how we see ourselves, right? And so if we have guilts and shames and things that we're guilty for and things we're shameful for that's happened in our life, we diminish our own self-worth and we diminish our how much we perceive that we deserve in life. So ability to receive is in direct proportion to how we view ourselves. Now, I created a list of all the things I felt guilty for and all the things I felt shameful for that's happened in my life. And so that list, what I'll do is I'll write out that experience, and I'll write, if it was something I felt shameful about, I'd write, what was the benefit to me? And I'll see how that particular thing served me, and how that was, and then it starts to reveal how that was actually part of your purpose. You know, oh my God. And so that's where you dissolve that feeling of like you did something wrong or you did something bad. And that then your perception is what creates your perception of whether it's good or bad. So if we're talking about karma, you know, if you perceive something you did bad as karma, it's just your perception of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Because you're only perceiving half the equation, right? You're only seeing how it was bad, how it was a negative experience. But when you take it and you ask the other side of the question, you're seeing it from a fuller state of awareness, seeing it from a state of mindfulness, not a state of mind, you know, halfness, you could say.
Yeah, I guess my understanding of karma is all actions that we take in the universe, all actions we take in life, almost is debted on us. For example, if we go out and kill a person, that killing of that person will hang around our being for some time. That's my idea of karma. Like at one point in one point of your life, you will have to repay that murder that you've just and I don't know how you'll repay it, but you'll have to. That's my understanding of karma. Yeah, so I guess instead of going too deep into that area, you spoke about the word shame, and I want to kind of speak into that a little bit, because you're massive on stopping porn. So I mean, look, dude, I don't think any guy in the world can say they haven't watched porn, and I'll put my hand up to that. And
totally.
you know, but I feel like, what's been your experience on that? I'm interested to hear that. Like, what made you say that? What made you come out with that message?
I'm not sure if I explicitly said just like you need to stop porn, because it can serve at different stages of life, and it's whether it's helping you, like whether you're fulfilling your purpose, and it's neither good nor bad, right or wrong, but it is something that we can use what are called escapisms, right? Porn's one of them. There's many of them. So if we're not fulfilling our purpose and we haven't got a long-term objective and a long-term vision and a long-term purpose to make up for the unfulfillment in our lives, we turn to instant gratification. And what happens is we get a dopamine kick, whether it's drugs, whether it's sugar, whether it's porn, whether it's video games, whether it's entertainment, watching Netflix, whether it's sports, whether it's consumerism, consuming other people's brands instead of building something incredible around our own lives and making a difference in the world. We turn to these short-term hits, these short-term quick fixes. And so porn's just one of them. And so from in my experience, that was one of my last, I guess, escapes, because I'd stopped drinking, I'd stopped using sugar in food, because I grew up fat, as I told you, as a fat kid. I stopped buying meaningless stuff. I stopped video games, stopped all of that. But it was the one thing that was just easy, accessible. That was like, all right, I'm not really doing anything productive right now. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go on www.x videos or Pornhub or whatever it is. And it's kind of starts like, as something just meaningless and in the moment, and then all of a sudden it can very easily become addictive. And that's what it was occurring for me. I was like, I need to be doing this. And I wasn't feeling fulfilled in what I was doing. So then you turn to the short-term quick fix. And so if you aren't clear on your purpose, if you aren't clear on what truly inspires you and your set of particular values that are specific to your DNA, to your fingerprint, as your retinal pattern, as your voice pattern, if you're not clear on what those are, you're going to be susceptible to short-term gratification. Right?
Okay.
Because long-term vision pays you, but short-term gratification costs you.
Yeah,
and you start to like literally wire your brain to the more you do an activity, the more neural pathways they become connected and stronger. And it's like having a piece of string, then adding another piece of string, and then until you've got this thick rope, and now you can't break that. And so we can easily get caught into those addictive behaviors and addictive patterns. And it takes about 28 days to break an old habit. Then you need 28 days to form a new habit on top of that. And then you need 28 days to make a habit a habit. So about 90 days is what you need to break it. And so actually today's day 90 for me of no ejaculation. I haven't actually shared this with anyone on social media yet.
Damn. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing, bro.
And so that was something that I've experienced in this stage of my life. It's like I want to experience intimacy and use the act of sex to transmute my energy into creation, into altered states of consciousness. And we have power to this, but this is not talked about in the mainstream because, if we're going for the short-term quick fixes, we're being consumers, if we're consuming the entertainment on Netflix, we're being obedient, civilized, sheeple. And that's what a small percentage of people in the world like. They don't want people being awake. They don't want people being aware. They don't want people going out and fulfilling what's most inspiring to them and lifting up lifting up other people in the world, because we're more easily influenced when we don't have a clear purpose. Because whenever you're those who are inwardly fluent are outwardly influential, right? Those who are inwardly lost are outwardly influenced.
That's some powerful shit. I like that statement. That is really cool. Yeah, that's really awesome.
So that's why it's so important. Every single human being has a duty, a responsibility, and an obligation to actually get clear on what it is that their purpose is. And their life's displaying it. Their life's actually displaying it in their everyday actions and behaviors. But we get caught on other people's expectations and what we think we should be doing. And so anytime we hesitate, procrastinate on life, it's because we're doing something and setting goals that aren't actually aligned with our true life purpose. We're setting goals that we think we should be doing because we've injected other people's perspective into our life and into our mind, and that clouds the clarity of that inner voice.
Yeah, I'll share. I just want to share with you where I'm at in my life, and I'm at a crossroads at the moment because I'm about to lose my job, and I'm thinking about getting into the health and wellness industry, thinking about getting into personal training. But there's so much information. There's just so much shit out there. I've got so many people telling me, do this, do that. So, so it's like I want to help people. Like I want to help people, get fit, get healthy, and all these things. And there's just so many ways to do it. It's like really, it's a bit overwhelming in a way. So yeah. So
okay. Do you want to speak into that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just right now. I'm just kind of I'm thinking about getting my Cert 3 and Cert 4 in personal training, and it's a bit of a shift because I'm in IT at the moment. So it's a soul degrading job, dude. It's like it's just like soul crushing. It's
Mm.
really yeah, man. It's just not. It doesn't light you up. Like it's just there's no passion in the job at all. It's just a very robotic job, and yeah, man. I really want to help people. Just want to help people out, pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah, man.
that's yeah.
And so that's part of when it comes to being, you're talking about being of service now, like, and wanting to help other human beings and be of service, right? That's one of the most fulfilling things we can do. And that's a good place to start, is like, start with what you know that you want to do and let what you know grow. And so there's every single human being has an innate desire to want to make a difference in the world. It's actually called in biology what's called a biological imperative. Like every single species has a biological imperative to survive. And human beings, because we can reflect, and like I said earlier in the show, we have the ability to see a vision in the future. Our level of intelligence is beyond just survival, right? And so our part of why we are here is because we all want to make a difference. We have the desire to leave the world a better place than when we showed up. And that's called a biological imperative. So we all have this biological imperative within us to make a difference and to serve. And so right now in the world, like, we are in one of the most opportunistic eras in all of human history. Like, we're having this conversation on a fucking screen, like our ancestors wouldn't even been able to conceive this. Like, if we said to them, went back in time and said, hey, guess what? Like, we're talking to each other on script, like these things, and they'd look at us and be like, what the fuck? You're crazy. Like, that's some, Star Trek shit, And so we have so many opportunities and options around us. So this is what causes overwhelm, as we have all these different opportunities. But let me ask you a question. When you were at school, what frame were you given to look at the world? What were you asked to do? Get a good job so you can,
like, make money,
exactly,
get a house, yeah.
get a good job so you can make money. That was the lens that everyone at school is given. They're like, here, this is how you're going to govern your life, by making money. And that's the start of our enslavement, because then we're enslaved to the dollar. We're enslaved to money. We're not a master of it. So when we get clear on if we were asked, what is it that you'd love to do with all your heart and soul, Kristian?
Help
Because
people.
when you're doing that, right?
Yeah.
You activate when you're doing something that's aligned with your purpose. What happens now, we're talking in biology and physiology, what happens is you activate your prefrontal cortex, which is the crowning achievement of human evolution. That's what separates us from the animals, right? And you activate this creative center, the executive center of the brain, and all the blood, all the oxygen, all the glucose goes from the animal part of the brain, which is looking to survive. It's associated with survival and seek the prey and avoid the predator, seek support, avoid challenge, seek ease, avoid difficulty, right? That's the animal part of the brain. Seek pleasure, avoid pain. And when we get caught in that, we're caught in an emotional state. We're like a rat in a cage. Oh, I've got to get the next job. Oh, I've got to get the next paycheck. Oh, I've got to get this. And so we give up on our goals, dreams. We give up on our purpose for a wage packet. We give up on our purpose for money. And that's how we've been trained. Because then we're more easily influenced by that. If we have that perception, I need to get a good job just so I can make money, just to get by, pay the bills and survive. And so when you do whatever's aligned to your purpose, that's a byproduct, because you have your creativity, your inner genius, your authenticity. And if you're doing what you love, people can't wait to come and get what you love to give. They want to be around people who are doing something fulfilling with their life, and they're making a difference, and they have a movement, and they have a vision, and have a purpose. People want to be around people like that. And so they'll pay for your services. They will spend time. They'll spend money to hang out with you and learn what you got to teach. They'll invest in you because it's an investment in themselves. Because human beings, we don't want to be going around and living by low priority and living by just getting by. We all have an innate desire to make a difference in the world, and we all know we have that potential. But for a lot of us, we have these subconscious limitations.
Yeah, for sure. What do you and what's your opinion on like external influences like family? Because I know family can, family's so close to the heart, and it can almost take you off the rails. What's your opinion?
Totally.
Yeah.
This is a really good point because so we chose our family before we showed up here, right? Like our soul would have, in my understanding and what I've like the places that I've gone to seek truth and wisdom, there's a part of me that somewhat believes that before we showed up here, our soul, and soul means is the part of us that's eternal, right? The part of us that's just been here. Because if we break down the human form into cells and then to atoms, like all the energy that existed at the Big Bang, right? If we look at, I believe in what's called creative evolution, everything exploded into the universe. All the energy at that moment there's exact the same amount of energy in the universe that there is today as there was at the Big Bang. So what we are made up, we are literally as old as time. Me and you are as old as time, but our consciousness in this physical form is only, in this linear amount of years. I'm not sure how old you are, 20 something years, right?
I'm 30.
Oh, 30. 30 years ago, but we're only aware of so much. But we're as old as time. The particles that we're made up is as old as time.
Yeah.
And so before we show up here, we choose what the experiences that we're going to have that are going to take us on the greatest evolutionary path of our soul.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we're talking about family now and the influences of family around us, they're our greatest teachers, because whenever we perceive that, so this is one of the biggest fears, because there's 8 major fears that a human being has, and it's to do with each area of life. So if we perceive, for instance, that we aren't smart enough, we'll be told what to think. So the fear is intellectual shortcomings. Oh, I'm not gonna be able to explain it. I'm not gonna be able to talk about it. So we have that fear. Now, when it comes to family, we have the fear of loss of love. So if we perceive that, we'll be governed by the limitations that our family have perceived or have lived their life by. So this is why, this is when they start to talk about, it's just in your genes. You're either born with it or you're not. But then we look at the world, like 80% of self-made millionaires are 80% of millionaires are self-made in the world. But we perceive that it's like, it's been handed down to them, but it's only a very small few, because it shifts in every generation. It shifts in every generation because it's not always passed on, and then the next generation weren't given the skills or the ability to go and reproduce those results.
Yeah.
So then when we're talking about our family and we're talking about wanting to make a difference in the world, wealth received equals value given. So that's why it's used as such a strong metric, because it's like you can go out and give all your stuff away for free and go out there and do that, right? But then what resources are you going to do and then reproduce that and then reach more people? So we can get really, really caught on, what is my parents going to think? What are my family going to think? What if, what if they're going to judge me? And this is where I spend a lot of time, hesitating and procrastinating on where I was going and what I was headed. I would think about putting out a Facebook post and be like, oh, what if my mum sees it and says something more? What if my brother or my auntie thinks like this is, and I'd get caught up about what they were going to perceive. But the point of family is that no matter what you do, right, they're either going to love you, right, or not. Like, they might disagree with you, but family is where the heart is, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so they're here in some way, shape, or form to awaken us to express who we truly are, as opposed to stay in the shadows and stay small and to make someone else feel big, or to make someone else feel more significant. We generally will shrink and become insignificant. But we're here to do something magnificent. We're here to magnify who we are, what we were given. Because I don't know about you, man, but I want to get to the end of my life, and I think everyone's going to get to the end of their life and ask themselves one question. Do you know what that is?
Have I made a difference? Or I don't know.
Almost, but we're going to ask ourselves, did I do everything I could with everything that I was given?
Yeah.
And we want to be able to say, fuck yes.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? And so if we continue to play by the limitations and the standards of other people in our environment, then we're going to limit what we can actually achieve as well, what we can actually do in our life as well. And when it comes to our family, so from the ages of 0 to 8, we construct 85% of our neural pathways in our brain through a process called observation, and mirror neurons are created. So from ages of 0 to 8, we construct 85% of our personality, which then creates 85% of our personal reality. So our concepts of reality are hardwired into our brain by the time we're 8 years old. And so that is all learnt through our immediate associations, which is our tribe, our family, our parents, whoever's in our life from that period of time. We construct 85% of our neural pathways and neural nets in our brain, 85% of our personality. So what does that actually mean? So by the time we're 8 years old, we're going through the world and we have about 60,000 thoughts a day, and we're only having one new thought per day. So our future is basically our past folding in on top of itself over and over again. Would you agree that you go through emotional cycles in your life?
Yeah, 100%, definitely.
So what happens, how we create emotions so we have an experience from that in those formative years. Then we create a memory, all right, and that's in the brain, and tied to that memory is an emotion. So whenever we have a similar experience in our life, we don't think of the first time we did it, but whenever we have a similar experience in our life and someone triggers us and we have an emotional reaction, we get emotional, we revert back to cellular memory and we behave like an 8-year-old. That's why, there's grown men, grown women who live in the world, but they're responding to the world as if they were 8 years old.
Yeah, right. Is that something to do like with trauma? Like if you've experienced like a very traumatic incident when you're young, does that play in the memory? Does that play somewhere in the consciousness or?
Totally. So
yeah,
when we talk about trauma, it's the perception of what happened to us, right? Like because to give you an understanding, like, so when we have that experience, we polarize and we categorize it as good or bad, happy or sad, pleasure or pain, right or wrong. And so all human emotion, do you agree that sometimes you're up in your emotional states?
Yeah.
And do you agree that sometimes you're down in your emotional states?
Yes.
All right. So all human emotion is bipolar.
What do you
All
mean by
human
that?
emotion.
Sorry.
So all human emotion is bipolar. It's polarizing. You can't have happy without sad. You
Oh,
can't
yeah,
have
yeah.
peace without war. You can't have pleasure without pain. You can't have right without wrong. If I said to you, Kristian, when you get here, you can press this button, or you can have this pill, and when you show up here, you can just be happy the whole way through. Would you take it?
That's a good
Just be
question.
straight with me. Just be
I
straight up with me.
probably would take it.
But then let me
But
ask you
yeah,
another question.
but then it's like you never get to truly appreciate the happy if you don't go through those sad times. So I don't know. It's a real mystery. It's a real paradox in that way.
So the truth is, how would you know? How would you know that you were happy? You wouldn't, right?
You wouldn't know.
So
No.
there's Kohlberg, who was a psychologist last century, said that there's this what's called a contrasting effect. So we have this contrasting effect of we can't experience one without the other. It's like if you put your hand in one hand in hot water and one hand in cold water, right? And you let them sit and you got used to them. And then you put each of those hands in warm water, you wouldn't know which one was the hot and which one was the cold.
Okay.
So it's just dependent on the contrast. So we wouldn't know what happiness feels like if we wouldn't know what sadness feels like. We wouldn't know what good if we didn't know what bad felt like, and so forth. And now, talking about, perceived trauma is whatever we perceived happened to us. We create an experience, we polarize it, and to the degree that we perceive a more traumatic experience, the more bipolar that emotion or that experience.
Okay.
The more fractured the psyche becomes. So when we show up here, we show up at what's called, what science calls 0 point, and what the ancients called a state of mysticism, where there was no difference between the floor and the wall, mum and dad, like we were one with the universe and everything was one with us. But as we go throughout our lives, we have these experiences, we polarize them as good and bad, right and wrong, happy and sad. And as we go throughout our lives, we create an experience, which then is tied in with a memory, which then we have an emotional, the end product of an experience is an emotion.
Okay.
Right? And so if we perceive we had a bad experience, right, there's an emotion tied to that. And then if anything triggers us and brings that similar experience back up, we'll go back to that same emotional response. And that emotion then is hardwired into the brain and the body, because the thoughts are the language of the mind and emotions are the language of the body. So if we have a sad thought, we trigger and we fire and wire thoughts of sadness, which then create neural transmitters, which then convert into neural peptides. And neural peptides are the messengers between the brain and the body, right? That passes out of the hypothalamus and into the body, and we produce a chemical compound called an emotion. And in this example, the emotion of sadness. And so our body's feeling sadness. And then our brain will pick that up and go, oh, we're feeling sad. So you'll start feeling how you're thinking at first, and then you'll start thinking about how you're feeling, and you'll create this feedback loop. That's why we get caught in these spiral of emotion.
Okay. So let's say I'll try and give an example. Let's say Harry, he's young and he didn't get his favorite chocolate ice cream, or maybe he's gone through something very traumatic, maybe a little bit more traumatic than the ice cream thing. But what are some ways that people can go about healing themselves and healing the trauma, like practical ways?
Okay, so one of the biggest things that I take through my clients through in Discover Your Purpose is we go through and we identify exactly what that experience was.
Okay.
And we completely rewire that whole experience. We completely rewire it. We turn it on its head, and we see how it was a blessing. How did it serve us? What did we gain from that experience? what do we have to summon from within in our experience? And when I take my clients through that process, we get them to a point where the heart opens, and when the heart opens and you're in a state of unconditional love, the biological and physiological feedback is a tear comes down your cheek and you're grateful of what happened. So that's when the heart and the brain become synced. That's when you have an inspired vision. That's when you're in homeostasis. So that's almost like the opposite of what a traumatic experience does. So a perceived traumatic experience can be genetically encoded into our DNA up to 5 generations back. So the caveman seen a lion for the very first time, and he's like, "Oh, look at this nice kitty," and he goes and pats it, and his son sees it, and he gets he gets ripped apart, and then the son's like, "Holy shit, that was like traumatic." And then he has a son, and then his son sees the lion for the first time. He gaps it as soon as he sees the lion, just for example's sake, right? Because it's encoded into the DNA. And so this is what happens with us. But when we do that, we're actually encoding an experience of gratitude and grace and unconditional love, and where we transcend the moral judgments of good and bad, right and wrong, and we experience a state of unconditional love for whatever occurred. And then we encode that into our DNA, which can then be passed on 5 generations into the future. So one of the most important things we can do is identify and dissolve whatever we perceive happened to us. Because how we do this, right, is how we create our stories is every time we have our past is actually 50% of it's made up. So there was a researcher, and he went and he interviewed all these people after 9/11. And he interviewed them and he asked them, what were they wearing? What were they doing? Who were they with? And then 10 years later, he went back to those same people and he asked them the exact same questions. And 50% of what they had said was completely different. And in fact, all of them said, he said, these 2 stories are completely different. And then he said, which one's the truth? And he said, oh, the one I recently just told you. That's the truest one. Not the one when they first were in that experience. So we know that now the brain, right, will change an event and an experience based upon how we're feeling in the moment that we remember it. So if we're feeling sad and we're in that state of like feeling this emptiness, or we're feeling this state of loss, we're confused, and then we bring up an experience of why me, seek the answers that we ask it. So the questions that we ask ourselves is very important, which I'll go into in a sec. But if we're asking why me, why does this always happen to me? What we go do, what happens in the brain is, consciously or subconsciously, we start going through and we start archiving and bringing up all those memories of where we didn't feel enough, where we didn't feel smart enough, where we didn't feel good enough, where we didn't feel lovable enough, where we didn't feel accepted.
Yeah.
And we start to bring up all those memories and we start to associate whatever's happening in our life to all those past events. And that just reconfirms our subconscious limitations, and we're just hardwiring them in even deeper. And so by the time from ages 8 to 35, we construct the other 15% of the neural pathways in our brain. So by the time we're 35, and this is science, we're a set of automatic behaviors, unconscious programs, and emotional reactions. We're hardwired. We're literally, our personality is set in stone by the time we're 35. And unless we know how to ask questions, because questions that we ask ourselves determine the quality of the life we have. So the quality of the questions we ask determine the quality of the life that we actually get to experience. And so if we don't know how to ask questions, because questions can literally rewire the brain, and answering those questions can rewire the brain. So if I ask you a question, like, let's say if I asked Harry, who, he experienced this traumatic thing where he's seen, something, he's seen his dad chop off the head of a chicken And that was like branded into his mind, like, oh my God, this experience. It's probably not the greatest example, but it's something that I remembered as a kid, and it's probably why I don't eat meat anymore. I haven't eaten any animals for like 6 years, and
Okay.
and so like if he perceived that experience as like, oh, woe is me, you know, my life's hard, and they shouldn't have done that. That was bad. That was wrong. Then we're going to constantly live our life from a place of where that story owns us. That becomes our identity.
Yeah.
We become our story, and we can't create anything greater than what we've experienced. And so that becomes our identity. And then if someone even tries to, challenge someone on that, or if you get challenged, like, and people think that they become their story, and so they will literally fight you to keep their story because it's part of who they are. They'll have without their story, they don't know who they are, and so they come from a place of, and we've all done this. No one really, unless you go through and you do the deep work, the inner work to dissolve these. Like, we're constantly at the mercy of our story. If daddy didn't love me, then that means I'm not good enough and I'm unlovable. If mommy wasn't nurturing enough, that means, I'll be rejected. If I couldn't do this right, then I'm not intelligent enough. And we will carry that subconscious equation around with us for our whole lives. And by the time we're 35, it's literally hardwired into the brain. But the good thing is, we now know that the brain is neuroplastic. So neuroplasticity, and that we can rewire our brain. But it's not something that can happen just by, doing a sound healing, or doing some breath work, or doing some, like some NLP, or doing some of this stuff. Like, there's actually like, those things will work in the moment, right? But they're a Band-Aid. They're a Band-Aid to the bigger thing, and that's literally Have you seen the movie Inside Out?
No, I haven't.
Oh, so it's an animated kids movie, and it explains it perfectly in this example. So there's a moment where the girl's sitting on the tree and she's all sad because something happened. I think she was like a star player in a sports team, baseball team or something, and she's sad because she didn't win the game, and it constantly goes back to her experiencing this. And at the very end, you see her sad, and then one of the players goes up to her and says, "We did great today." And then they push her up and they hold her up, and they're like cheering her on.
Yeah.
And she remembers the other side of the equation. She remembers the pain and the pleasure. And they happened basically simultaneously and to the same degree. So it was one moment she's sad, down and out, and the next minute she's getting cheered up. But the brain latches onto those negative experiences, and we don't see anything else. And so when we rewire the brain and we go through this process, we see the hidden blessing, we see the divine order, and how that experience completely transformed our lives. I'll give you an example of this. So I was in a serious relationship a couple of years back, and the woman that I was seeing, we decided to go into what's called an open relationship. And this is my ever first time experiencing this. And so we go into this open relationship, and I'm working away up on the mines at the time. And she says to me, "Look, I just want to have a one-on-one with this person." And that was the biggest fucking, we had a lot of trust and a lot of understanding. And I was like, I was kind of at a point in this relationship where she'd cheated on me before, and she expressed emotional remorse, and she felt sadness about that. So I felt like, okay, she actually cares. She actually wants this to work out. Otherwise, she wouldn't have told me, and she wouldn't be upset about it, and she wouldn't be expressing how she wants to stay together. So I was like, all right, I'll take it for what it's worth, and we'll try and make this thing work. And so then, 6 months later, she tells me this again, and I'm just like, by this time, I'm just completely given up on the relationship. So I'm like, all right, I understand. go and do what you need to do, and I accepted that. And I went through a period of heartbreak and whatnot, and so about a year later, I was going throughout my day, and all of a sudden, the person that my ex-partner had gone with, thoughts of them started coming up in my mind. And I started having this resentment towards them. And I was like, fuck, it's been a year, and my mind is still occupied by this low priority bullshit. It's still being occupied. My mind and the space in my mind and my time and my energy is still being occupied by this fucking story that happened over a year ago. And so I was like, I need to sit down and I need to do the process on this person. I need to get clear. I need to get grateful on what this gave me. So I sat down, I did the process, and then all of a sudden you get to this point and it's like everything just kind of clicks in. You get this moment of clarity. You're like, oh my God. And like literally tears start streaming down your face and you're like, holy shit. And you start laughing to yourself because you're like, what the fuck was what was I doing? And in that moment, I realized that this woman or this person had, this person who had taken, who had gone off with my ex-partner, they had given me freedom, my independence back. They'd given me my strength and my power back, because I was in this relationship. I was so lost in there and what they were doing with their life.
Yeah. And
me building them up and me helping them, and means like I lost myself. I gave up all my purpose. I gave up all my values and channeled it into them. And this is what happens in relationships quite a lot. We lose ourselves in them. We give up on the things that are most inspiring, most important things. And the things that we love, we give up on the things we love for them, thinking that that's what they want, and they might be even expressing that to us, but it's ultimately the relationship's being tested to see if we're going to stay true to us and stay authentic. And when we lose ourselves, attraction diminishes, because you stop doing the things that you were loving and the things that attracted them in the first place. So that's exactly what had happened in this relationship. And I just got it in this moment. I'm just like, oh my fucking God. And I was like, wow. And so, I'd gotten my independence, my strength, my power, and my freedom back because of what happened. But it took me a year of that thought still just hanging around, and me going, you know what? I'm going to just have to make a call. I'm going to have to actually go through and do the work, do the hard work. Because, anyone who's trying to sell you anything online, anyone who's trying to say, oh, it's easy process, it's easy system, they're talking bullshit, because anything requires challenge in life. For us to grow, we actually require challenge. So there's people in the world right now who are just seeking comfort and ease and support, and that's all they want. And what will happen is when you seek those things, you will subconsciously attract difficulty and challenge into your life, because nature is designed to help us grow, right? But people who go out and they seek challenging situations to overcome. This is the entrepreneur's journey. They seek problems to solve. They seek difficulties to overcome and to create solutions for. What happens with people who do that is they support and they attract support and ease and people who want to be a part of what they're doing, because they've actually gone out and consciously choose the challenge that they want to overcome and help other people overcome.
Yeah.
So they're thinking greater and outside of themselves. But people who are living in living quiet lives of desperation, they're caught in trying to take the road of support and ease and comfort. And then next thing, the car breaks down. Next thing, the fridge stopped working. Next thing, these other things and this other thing and this other thing starts happening, because nature is designed to help us grow, and we can't escape. We can't escape that. But we've been sold and marketed to since birth by the big institutions to take that short-term quick fix. The cake, get the cake, buy the next thing, get the next hit. And so we've been marketed to, and we've been sold to take the easy road. to take the easy road, and we've people have forgotten how to think. They've forgotten how to think for themselves. Literally, it's easier to sit down and solve your problem. It's easy to go on Facebook and scroll and watch all the pump me up videos on YouTube and inspirational quotes, and go and sit there and do that for half an hour and get a quick hit and bury our head in the sand. It's easy to do that than go and sit down and actually do the work and solve something meaningful and do something meaningful and purposeful with our lives.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's yeah, bro. It's like yeah, man. Like I'm a bit lost for words. I don't even know what to say at the moment. But yeah, it's dude. It's my brain's blowing up with all the information that you've given me, man. It's just I've written a few things down, so I appreciate you sharing your wisdom, sharing your knowledge. I hope people that listening right now, they got some value out of the content that you've shared, because you're obviously a very wise person. You've got that. I know that you've got a bit of self-education, or you've been educated by a lot of people in life, so it definitely comes through. You've definitely sharing that knowledge. So we've hit the hour mark, and how can people connect with you, Brett? What's the best way for people to find you online? And
just on my Instagram, Brett Dobre, Dobre.
Brett Debray. All right. Well,
That's the best place to reach me.
best place to reach you. All right. Cool. Well, we might end the podcast here.
Brilliant.
Thanks again for
awesome chat, Kristian. It's been amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty deep. We went very deep down the rabbit hole. This is probably one of the
You're pretty good at this, man.
Thank you. Oh well, enjoy your day, guys, and.